Hello, I'm Cindy Arenberg Seltzer, President and CEO of the Children's Services Council of Broward County. Welcome to another edition of Future First, Focus on Broward's Children. In Broward, as in other parts of the country, we've been asking some hard questions about how justice, specifically as it applies to youth, is allocated across race and gender. Young black men in particular are disproportionately affected by arrest and detention, with all too often lifelong negative consequences. The question is, are there alternatives to incarceration that address victims' needs while providing services to the juvenile offender that can create a path so that a young person can become a responsible, productive adult? The Children's Services Council has been a leading supporter of the use of civil citations, encompassing many of the tenets of restorative justice approach as delivered by providers of some of the CSC-funded programs. Recently, we had the honor in Fort Lauderdale of hosting the 5th National Conference on Community and Restorative Justice. The event served as an opportunity to address these issues while promoting effective forms of justice that are equitable, sustainable, and socially constructive. Joining me today to discuss the growth and implementation of the restorative justice approach in Broward County and beyond are Mikelange Olbel, founder and CEO of Team Saving Our Youth, also known as Team SOY, Myriam Campo-Goldman, CEO and founder of Harmony Development Center, Jacqueline Lashbrook, Youth Services Supervisor with the Broward Sheriff's Office, and Audrey Stang, our own Interim Chief Program Officer at the Children's Services Council. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Audrey, I'm going to start with you because this problem of disproportionate minority representation has actually been a problem in this community probably forever, but it is one of the first things that CSC tackled when we first had funding authority back in 2001. And you, at that time, coming from DJJ, really had a vision for us in how we could tackle it. Can you talk a little bit about why restorative justice and how CSC has used that as a tool?
Yes, thank you, Cindy. When I was still with the Department of Juvenile Justice, I got exposed to restorative justice as an alternative to the way criminal justice is traditionally taken care of. And there were just some elements of it that just seemed to really ring true and bring in a whole different healing aspect to the whole justice question. At the time, when we were asked by the community to help them, there was a crisis that the Department of Juvenile Justice had defunded their diversion programming. So the state attorney's office basically had a decision to file and take every kid to court or nothing, pretty much. So as you know, we went forward at the CSC and we created diversion programs under our New Day RFP. And because I was so fascinated with restorative justice, I made that sort of a linchpin of those programs because I really wanted to see us address the misconduct in a different way that healed communities and the kids and created pathways to make true amends to victims that were based on what had actually happened, the harm that had actually occurred because of the child's misconduct, which is a piece that's sort of missing when you go to court. When you're going to court, it's sort of the state versus the child. The victim sort of gets sidelined in the process. So what restorative justice does is it moves the victim into the center, not demanding that they be part of it if they don't want to, but making sure their input is definitely part of it.
And I think sometimes people's perception is that, oh, you're just letting the perpetrator or the person the child who did the crime off the hook. And so that part about the victim voice, I think, is really important. You two were two of our earliest adopters of restorative justice. Myriam,
Yes.
you with Civil Citation. Do you want to talk about that?
I think it's very important to understand that in restorative justice, we really promote accountability and we also responsibility. It's not that they can get out of the hook, like some people believe. It's really the responsibility that the offender or the person who do the misbehavior takes about the action that they committed against the victim or against society, because this is not only against victims, crime, it's also against society and community. Therefore, we try to heal, to bring all the parties involved together, to make a resolution together instead of be punitive, because punishment obviously helps, but it's not the response, it's not the answer to a huge, big issue that we have these days, like is the disparity between minorities being arrested over and over again. So that's when we started doing the restorative justice in our programs, Jackie, you remember that time, that we were providing and promoting restorative justice as a response of justice instead of being punitive, being restorative.
Exactly. And so we're bringing together that person who committed the harm with the person who has been harmed. And also we're bringing in members of the community so that they're able to represent to that offender, to that person who committed the harm, how that harm has affected everyone. And they're really then able to accept responsibility for what they did. And they actually all together come up with an agreement on what has to be done to repair that harm. So it's a very interesting response because it's not anyone dictating to that group of people how to resolve this problem. You're really empowering everyone in that group to be able to resolve the problem on their own. I really believe that if people have the opportunity to sit down and talk to each other, that they can resolve their own problems. And we see that in our conferences.
Michael, I know that idea of healing and the power of this is really important to you. How do you see it?
You know, when I was introduced to RJ by Audrey and one of my staffs, Sharif Eagle, I went to the conference, I observed the information I was giving. And one thing I realized most is that RJ brings healing. There's an aspect of RJ that people don't get to see. It's the ideal of that child or the notion of that child saying, listen, I acknowledge what I did was wrong. When you throw a kid into jail, he never go through that process of restoring himself, right? So here the victim may see the restoration because now this child have gone to jail, what have you, but now this child don't get the opportunity to be restored himself or herself. So what we're doing is really creating this avenue for this child, and not just the child, but the parent as well. Because the parent needs healing as well in the process. The parent is embarrassed of what's going on with their child. They can't believe it, family shame, we all know how that goes. And mom and dad need to take a step back and say, listen, does this make me a bad parent? And so many times we get those parents who say, does this make me a bad? No, you're not a bad parent. But let's put some protective factors in place. Let's take the first step with healing first, because we all know you cannot transform anyone until they are healed, right? So the victim get the healing, and the victimized get the healing.
Yeah, and I know some police departments and some leaders have been a little leery because they think, oh, this is soft on crime, this is taking away responsibility. But the sheriff has taken a real leadership role. While you've been in the game for a long time, Sheriff Israel has said civil citation, restorative justice, he's fully on board. And have you seen that make a difference, Jackie, in the work that you're doing?
Oh, sure, absolutely. It's been incredible to have the sheriff's full support in civil citation. Deputies are required to issue civil citations now instead of making those arrests. And that gives those kids the opportunity to have a clean slate. In other words, before we were having to help them to get those records expunged after they would complete the program successfully. And now, with the civil citation, they don't have to worry about that expunction process. So it's an incredible opportunity for kids, and they do avail themselves of the opportunity. We have very good success rates of the kids completing the civil citation programs.
We've talked before on this show about the fact that it may feel good from a victim's perspective to have a child locked up, thrown in jail. It may give you a sense of satisfaction at that moment, or you may think, I'm going to teach that child a lesson, not recognizing that that lesson can destroy the rest of their life.
Absolutely.
And another issue with that is, we sometimes think in this country we can send people to prison and be done with it. Well, they all come out. Most of them come out. And they don't come out better, you know? And the same thing is true on the juvenile level. When we don't allow them that space to heal and that place to be confronted with what they did and work through it and own it and move past it and make amends and get whole again, we're really cutting it off, and we're cutting that off at such a young age in the juvenile system.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I think when you look at that healing circle, right? So you talk about healing, so there's the healing circle. And within that healing circle, someone from the community take part of it, the parent take part of it, the victim take part of it. Everyone get a chance to take part of this circle where this child get to heal.
But it isn't soft on the child.
No, it's not at all.
You know, it's a hard thing to sit and have and be faced with the people you hurt. You know, it's harder than going in front of a judge who's just reading off a paper.
There's a lot
Who
of
don't know
crying.
anything
There's a lot
about
of
you.
crying at conferences.
Right.
And
Very
also it's
emotional.
very important to understand that restorative justice promotes, it helps to see the needs of the victim, because maybe the needs of the victim is not that this individual go to jail.
Right.
Maybe the needs of the victim is be able to find out what happened, why to me. Those are the questions sometimes the victims we ask. Why me?
Victims
Why did you
wanna know.
choose me? And it's important to know what are the needs of the victims to really be repair. What is the harm? How can I repair the harm as an offender? But the victim receives the restoration through the offender in a way that is accommodating her needs or his needs. And also it's important because restorative justice promotes and helps the community to heal. Because not only is the victim, not only is the offender who needs to heal, it's the community itself. When they come back out from jail, what happened when they reintegrate into the community? What happened when they commit the offense and go out of the community to jail? What happened then? So it's very important on restorative justice conference and circles, family conferencing, all of this community justice that Jackie is very well at it. It's important to have. And that is through restorative justice. And unfortunately, in our system, sometimes the victims, they don't even have the ability to express the needs to be restored, to be, how can I heal? How can this be close into my situation? It can be physical needs, can be monetary needs, it can be emotional needs, and also psychological needs. All of those needs, restorative justice take in consideration in order to be promoted and processes all the healing and the relationships that are broken when a crime or an offense occurs.